And we are. So, hello everyone. Welcome to our session today. Um, it is a very sensitive topic that coaches in agile world are still learning and sometimes forget to use it. It's about the coaching agreement with our clients. And Nadezhda is probably one of the best people to talk about this. She has now a lot of knowledge in agile, and she is going through some Jedi coaching training professional. So I was so happy when she agreed to do this session with us to bring all of these two worlds together and bring this agile coaching agreement. Just a reminder that this session is going to be part of the Agile 20 Reflection Festival that is going on all the week of February to to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Agile Manifesto. And there is events going on around 24/7. So just follow the hashtag Agile 20 Reflections, and you can see events all around the world whenever you have time to follow up and see what's going on. So I'm not going to talk much about us. Welcome to Agile Ontario, people that are joining us for the first time and friends that have been here before. And I'm going to pass it to Nadezhda. Welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. Really excited to be here. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see it.
We can see it, yes.
Awesome. Um, okay, I'll just try to arrange my multiple windows. Just give me a second because I want to see the chat and I want to see everybody because I'll do my best to engage you in today's conversation. So today I'm bringing the topic of the intersection of professional coaching and agile coaching, or bringing the lens of professional coaching into agile transformation context. And yep. So that's just a bit about myself. My name is Nadezhda. I'm coming from Belarus, and past 8 years I live in Germany. My background is in psychology, and my first hands-on agile experience was probably somewhere in 2008, 2009. And for the past few years, I'm primarily focused on the enterprise level of business agility transformations and organizational development and executive coaching, team coaching is a part of what we do at my company, Able Now. There are also a bunch of other things and amazing places where I try to contribute a lot, including Business Agility Institute and Agile Alliance and some other amazing places. So let's get started. To keep it simple, really simple, there are three main things I want to share and discuss with you today. Is what is actually an Agile Coaching Agreement, why it is important, and what to consider when you create one. How do you create one? And before we dive super deep into setting the stage, I would like to invite you to use the reactions in Zoom to indicate, like, I'm really curious, are there any professional coaches on the call today? Um, or if you were coached professionally, or you were coached by a coach. You can use either reactions or like indicate if you're on video. Okay, we have a few people. Okay. It just will help me to understand how deep to go maybe into certain aspects. Okay, so now as we move in, I have a question. If you can I don't know, there are quite a few of us, so it's all right to mute yourself and say a few keywords. I'm curious about some maybe recurrent challenges that you notice in Agile coaching. Because I prepared quite a few, but I'm curious to hear from you. Okay, there is a chat. Oops, sorry. Back. Too fast. Okay, I opened the chat. Oh, okay. That was a good question from Mark about a freelance Agile coach. What does that count as a professional coach? What I mean by professional coach is most of the time associated with International Coaching Federation or European Mentoring Coaching Council. Okay, so I see a few more things popping up in the chat about the challenges: fear of change, exceeding curiosity for better. Okay. So organization hires us and then we coach someone who might not have chosen for that. Okay, coaches won't commit to change. Ooh, cool. I couldn't foresee that. I just added to this slide some of the things I noticed or I found myself once in a while around. It would be great if you could at the top of your screen select the options and choose from the drop down annotate, and from annotate select a stamp and maybe put the stamp to the areas where you noticed or where you can relate. Oh, we are hired to coach the other people. Yay, coach is hired to bring in magic, fix without changing anything. Yay. Oh, there is a cloud that I call what the hell, where I personally even struggle to give it a name. Okay. So yeah, I can see you also can relate to some of the life experiences as an Agile coach. I'll just, quickly expand things, saying that lack of support from leadership, at least in my experience, was something along the lines like, just go do your magic. Leave us alone. Or resistance in any shape or form, from unconscious avoiding to actually proactive sabotaging of the coaching efforts. Lack of buy-in is when you can literally sense that before you even started, somebody already decided that's not going to work. Unrealistic and conflicting expectations when, for example, you as a coach being dropped on the team, and this is the fix them request, and the team believes, well, we're actually doing fine. Can you fix the management for us? Lack of organizational development ownership is what I at least expected, had the conversation when one of the sponsors asked, aren't you supposed to transform us? Meaning like you're doing all the work. and we're just there, okay? So unclear mandate and boundaries is where you're literally finding yourself in a situation where you cannot identify who is your client in the organization because it's so blurry and ambiguous. With the constantly shifting or inconsistent definition of success, priorities, and scope, I think it's pretty obvious. And excessive focus on frameworks and methods. I guess we've more or less all been there. All right. So I want to ask you one more question. It's all setting the stage for, oh, okay. So how do I annotate, clear all drawings? Okay. Can you see my screen well? Okay. So another question. What makes a team or a person coachable? What makes us coachable? What do you think? You can either unmute yourself or put some things in the chat. Curiosity, open mindset, love it. Trust, willingness, openness, feedback, open to feedback, willing to experiment, open to learn. That's cool. Feeling safe, wanting to grow. Oh, these are all like, there is no right or wrong answer there, honestly. But I remember that once I was asked that question, so what is actually makes us coachable? And up till now, the best answer I could come up with was, was about being a choice. And just with some personal reflections, do you remember when somebody decided something for you, thinking that's the best for you? And how did it impact you?
And then we claimed that that was not the best thing.
Yeah, but also how committed you feel to that decision. Like, did it overall stick? When somebody decided something for you that was important probably for you without actually involving you in the decision-making process. And this is where, at least what I've seen and experienced is the most impactful coaching comes with the so-called 3C. It starts with the choice to take a chance, to make a change, right? Paradoxically, coaching also results in 3Cs and different choices, opening new chances, enabling different changes, right? Now, let's also don't be delusional here, okay? Having options or being a choice does not necessarily mean you're gonna like the, the options presented, right? And important thing here is technically we're always a choice. It's just whether we notice it or not. And we'll be brought back to the very same situations again and again, again and again, until we learn to make different choices. So, to sum it up to our today's topic, I truly believe that coaching agreement is all about framing our choices. Now, you might think about, yeah, like of course, I can be responsible for my choices. What about the choices of others? And we'll talk about the compatibility of choices that is also part of coaching agreement. Very often, I will just quickly clear up the annotations before we go to the next slide. Okay. And I don't know about you, but there are quite a few situations where I felt the compatibility between the team and the coach looked like this scene from the Avatar movie. Like, how do I know if we're chosen for each other? Oh, you're gonna feel it.
Oh no.
All right. So are we, by the way, is the speed good enough? Because I'm trying, to get us to lots of practical stuff. So please let me know if I'm going too fast. I know these tendencies of mine. Okay, so with that, we're going to the actual what of Agile Coaching contract. Well, contract and agreement, I kind of use them interchangeably. What do we need to have clarity about to call it a coaching agreement? So while the list is not exhaustive by no means, and the contexts are unique and different, there are quite a few blocks that I suggest to look into. The first is we need to get clear on the coaching relationship, essentially what Agile coaching is and what it is not, what is and is not appropriate in this relationship, what is and is not being offered, as well as the responsibilities of all the parties involved. We'll get very practically in the how part around the questions framing that. But if everybody is all right with that, I'll just move to the next block. So the second is we need to get really clear about the process and what it involves, like really guidelines and specific parameters, like logistics, when, how we meet, scheduling, duration, termination. How do we know it's time to say goodbye? Confidentiality, inclusion of stakeholders, and so on and so forth. Coaching plan and goals. And this is where we will have to talk to the stakeholders and the client. Here, I mean the client. Most of the time, it's the team in Agile transformation context. So there is lots of, it's a rich conversation. It's a dynamic activity of framing Agile coaching agreement. And it's important to have alignment and cohesion in the plan and goals between all the parties involved. And last but not least, client-coach compatibility, where we explicitly give each other a chance and decide if it's a match. All right. Any questions so far?
Sounds like dating.
Oh, you get it. Well, probably very detailed dating plan, but still, it is important to have certain chemistry to be able to trust, to be able to try. And if it's not happening, you either can give it time and see if it's actually going, or decide that's not going to happen. Yeah, I see some comments that a lot of them are subjective. Sure, they are. That's why it's called agreement, because we agree and interpret things differently. But we will get to this in the how part that help us to hone into some specific things. But of course, they will be subjective by all the parties involved. So I consider the client to be whoever brings the agenda. In many organizational contexts, it's not actually the team, but some other sponsor. Ooh, great. We're getting to this because I'm going to mention sponsor and the team as different parties. I found that client and the coachee are different people. Well, very much depends on how you put those those things together. The client who's paying. Well, without just getting entangled in the different terminology, let me just share with you how I'm using it here. The client is actually the receiver of the coaching service. The sponsor is the one who creates the engagement with the coach, who sets the goals of the organization. And quite often, this is the person who is paying, who invests into coaching. Sometimes sponsor might be the client, sure, hiring for themselves. But in the organizational context, in the corporate coaching, quite often these are different roles. Free range coaching, you get the topics from the coaches, but in business, some third-party boss, yep, might be like to be involved in selecting the focus areas or topics because they pay. Yes, we'll be talking exactly about that. Then it is up to the coach to accept this deal or not. Yay, we already start, I already feel us starting getting into, okay, so this is the negotiation part. This is the compatibility part. So is coaching the sponsor avoidable? That's a great question. And I would like to get to this very, in very practical terms. But for now, I just want us to quickly touch upon the why and what are the benefits actually, and at least how it helped me to address some of the clouds that we've seen on the on the previous slide, on one of the previous slides. So the why, there are quite a lot of things that can be helped by creating the coaching agreement. And the first group is essentially all about the goals, expectations, scope. I think it's pretty obvious that once you start putting the goals, the expectations from the coaching service, it's already a good indication for you as a coach if it's a good faith engagement or not. Also, when you start talking about, hey, what you guys probably need help with, that might open up conversations around some potentially unaddressed needs. And the request is not necessarily matching the need. And this is the gap we can close while we're discussing Agile Coaching Agreement. And of course, once you have them written up, then you can keep your focus and prioritize the activities you plan accordingly. Okay. The second group is all around trust, transparency, and psychological safety. So when you put your coaching agenda openly and transparently, and you can tie up all your offers, ideas, and offerings to the goals of your coaching service, well, that serves building trust from day one. This is why you are doing this. And of course, when we have this dynamic activity of forming and shaping Agile Coaching Agreement, we try as best as we can to include all voices of the system. And that addresses the psychological safety. So yes, I'm heard. We're picking up the hottest issues. One more group of reasons why. Oh, those who worked with me closely know one of my favorite sayings. I'm not going to do your push-ups for you. And yes, I do incorporate it in my Agile coaching agreements. So those who want to grow and develop are responsible for their growth and development. You cannot make someone grow. You can try your best to provide your competency and create conditions conducive to agility. Oh, I see someone has the hands up.
Hi. Yeah, so just, I had a question when it came to focusing on the goals, especially at the initial stages where you might just have that conversation with a senior person. You might not really understand how teams work because it's always kind of discussed from their perspectives, right? So you might not understand the various kind of systems. How would you initially, when you're writing these agreements at the initial stages, come up with these goals and focus on these goals? Because later on, as you might start with the whole coaching process, you might discover all these other things that you might feel are more important or fundamental.
Absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you. First and foremost, Agile Coaching Agreement is not set in stone. We write it in sand. It is important to get everybody on the same page, but it doesn't mean that's once and forever. Second, I usually treat my Agile Coaching Agreements as iterative process. It is barely possible, especially when you're new, to have all the answers. Yet, it shouldn't prevent you from these conversations. Because
Gotcha.
if we always postpone the discussion until we have enough information, we never have this conversation. Because there is never enough information, and there is ever-evolving context. So I don't know if it answers your question, but I will be talking specifically about some practical steps. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
So yeah, and I'll just continue with the whys. We try to nurture the commitment to change by first asking, okay, you guys, these are your goals. What are you willing to try to achieve to those goals? So that they're committed to their change, not that you are working on them. Now, that's one, the group of partnership relationships and healthy boundary and necessary distance is probably my favorite one, because I personally struggle with that a lot. Coaching relationship is a very special type of relationship where you need to be an effective coach. You need to keep certain distance to the client in the service of objectivity, because this is the role that mirrors the system to itself. Of course, we become part of the system, and yet it's part of our stance, it's part of our responsibility to keep the necessary distance, to be of service, of better service to our client. And when we discuss the agreement, it is really indispensable means of bringing this partnership aspect into focus. And two more. I've composed quite a number of these coaching agreements, and if anything, something that never failed me, honestly, is that the whole process of discussing Agile Coaching agreement is a almost 100% guarantee litmus test on how the further coaching engagement will go. Honestly, if you're stepping into this conversation with the offer and your sponsor or your client are not willing to spend time on that, what are the chances that they would like to spend time on something else you offer? So this is already starting of your coaching engagement, the litmus test. And yeah, as you facilitate and engage all the parties in the creation of this agreement, you let them already in action experience your coaching. It is always exploration of edges. Also exploring your edges as a coach. It's a very interesting activity. And personally, I also keep Agile Coaching agreements as the reminder of when my day is not necessarily going very well. Things are no longer smoothly flowing through my relationship. For me, it's a great reminder of why I'm doing this. Yeah, Mark, Hino, whoever, please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight this idea of the litmus test. That as a freelancer, I find this step in the engagement really important, because through this process, you can plant the seed and walk away if they're not ready yet. And you may hear back later, and you can focus your attention with someone who is ready, and then circle back later and see if your provocative time together has taken root. And even inside an organization, I found sometimes it helps to shift attention to the more fertile ground after having planted some provocative seeds in one of the areas that you're responsible for. So frequently, you're brought in by a sponsor and they've got all these different things that they want done. And sometimes you can just plant the seed with this kind of initial engagement and move on to where you might be able to get some early wins, and then circle back to that more difficult area.
Thank you. That's very valuable indeed. That's really, really good point. Thank you, Mark.
So my question was related. My question was, so do you walk away? Indeed, if you realize, well, hey, we can't come to this agreement, we don't have an honest conversation about this, do you walk away, or are there other strategies that you can use to recover from that?
That's also a great question. First and foremost, I very often notice that in Agile community, for very good reasons, we are very much obsessed with relationships because they're most impactful. They provide the most long-lasting, sustainable change. But there is another way. You can employ transactional approach. So because not every engagement has to be relational. Sometimes it can be transactional engagement, where you just agree on a certain scope where you can agree and provide your service within that scope, but probably it's not going to be long-lasting or expansive as coaching relationship. And secondly, well, it's your choice whether to walk away or not. Did I answer your question? All right.
It did. Thank you.
Okay, so now I wanted to have, this is a bit of a comparison from, I have standing in the professional coaching, and there I mean the ICF context, International Coaching Federation context, and Agile transformation context. I already mentioned some of the contrasting differences, but these comparisons by no means exhaustive and complete, but it kind of gives you some idea of the edges that I noticed, and also that helped me understand as a professional coach why I previously ended up in so much of a hot mess with my relationship in Agile coaching transformations. So first, as rightfully mentioned already in the chat, when we talk about professional coaching, very often the coaching requests come from the client, from the actually person who wants to be coached. And in the Agile context, the coaching request more than often comes from a sponsor, be it the head of the company, the director, a certain business unit leader. They are the sponsor. So again, not a secret when we talk about professional coaching, most of it comes as individual format, Agile transformation, big complex thing. It's mostly corporate format with many stakeholders. Agreement in professional coaching is always the starting point. And based on this agreement, we start our way into developing of a coaching program for the client. I'm not saying that's always the case, but practically coaching agreement around, okay, so what are you hoping to achieve with the coaching support? How you know you are there? How we're going to have check-ins along the way to understand whether Agile coaching adds value or not. They're practically absent in Agile coaching, in Agile transformation context, unless there are some specific oral agreements with the sponsor of what kind of return on investment they expect. So professional coaching has a very, very specific code of conduct. And conflicts of interest are almost inevitable in Agile transformation. And with this, I'm not saying it's always going to be this way. Recently, Agile Alliance launched the Agile Coaching Ethics initiative. So I encourage everybody to take a look. It's work in progress, but I'm happy to see this trend, this movement. We'll talk about this also when we'll discuss triangulation. And last but not least, the outcomes are within a client area of responsibility when we discuss professional coaching. So the client is responsible for their outcomes. While in Agile transformation, some of the outcomes are quite often shared with the client, the team, by the Agile coach. Now, because I mentioned the conflict of interest, what is really important to mention for all of these Agile coaching contracts, Agile coaching agreements to work, is the so-called no triangulation rule, meaning we do not work with the indirect information. We do not secret, for example, a coach inquiring in a whisper, a sponsor, hey, do you have any complaints about the team? This is no. We also do not share our personal experience of coaching of individuals or groups with a third party unless we're explicitly given consent by those individuals or groups. And we do not act on behalf of the indirect information without first-hand exploration, because this is how it usually ends up. This is the triangle that we're trying to collapse. Oh, okay. I will share the slides if you want. Meanwhile, are there any questions? Can you relate? I definitely can. The invitation is, do not get caught in the middle. Triangulation can look very innocent as water cooler talks. Be very, very aware of what kind of information and how it goes. Because as a coach, just imagine, you wouldn't be probably happy if your client, the team, for example, has some feedback to you, but instead of talking to you about what they're not particularly happy about, they escalate it to the sponsor. This is triangulation. So that said, we're going into the how. And the how doesn't mean I have all the answers. Honestly, I don't. I'm still trying to figure this thing out. Yeah, I know, Hina, I'm disappointed as well. But I guess it's more about the questions that we shy away from rather than about the answers. And yes, in the beginning of the engagement, it might be really hard to start with this, as Mark mentioned, provocative questions. But if we miss this critical point, it ends up in pain for everybody involved. Okay, with that, let's go into how we actually do that. Again, I'm just willing to share some questions that I asked and why I think they're important, and you're more than welcome to unmute and add up from your experience, whether you find value in this or not. So the first question that I usually start with is actually getting aligned on what Agile coaching is and what it is not. And it is equally important to focus on what it is, as well as on the not part. Because focusing on the negative side also highlights some potential concerns that the team and the sponsor might have, or some not so happy past experiences. Okay, so you can ask, what does Agile coaching mean for you? Have you worked previously with an Agile coach? And if yes, what was that experience like? And how do you know you're ready to work with an Agile coach? And many other questions you can explore here. Any more questions there, or I just go next? And whenever you have questions or comments, you just unmute. What would be best? Okay. So then we do not come in and say, hey, you know what? I know how I'm going to fix you. We start with the questions. So where do you think you need support with? What is that you would like to have some help with? So voiced requests are not necessarily the same as needs. And it's really important here to employ your competences and skills in reading the room and picking up things that are not necessarily said. So here, not only asking the request, so where you need help, but also why is it important for you? And what is in your area of control? Because if sometimes the request might be coming from out of area of control of the team, that makes it really difficult. And also here we can explore what people have already tried in addressing those requests and needs. That gives you really rich context and background on what you'll be dealing with. Okay, a tip here is to invite sponsor to voice their requests and needs last. By obvious reasons, not to impose any bias. Okay, then we go into the goals and success criteria. So what is that exactly that you're hoping to achieve with Agile Coaching support? And how do you know you achieved your goals? You'll be surprised of how many teams were not able to answer that question when we were exploring it. Do you have such experience? Everybody's always clear. We know what we want. Okay. Okay. So here, another tip is you can start framing those goals and success criteria as OKRs, meaning you do not have to plan them far ahead. You can work by quarters with some foreseeable future and also focusing on what's really burning for the team. Okay. So as well in the goals and success criteria, you can explore how these goals are connected, if at all, to the organizational goals, so that it's not completely isolated. Yes, Hino?
You say you don't need to plan too far ahead. Well, what is a good time frame in your opinion, Nadezhda, to basically have these goals planned out? Are we talking 6 weeks, 3 months, whatever makes sense?
I don't think it makes sense to give you any specific number because it very much depends on, for example, how long the team has been working together. Mm-hmm. If it's a new team, it will take some time for forming, for them to actually get aligned on a number of things. So probably it makes sense to plan for shorter cycles to help them with this alignment and establish the cadence to keep the accountability and focus. For the teams who are more mature, have been working together for a longer time, it probably makes sense to plan a little bit more far ahead.
Even potentially with multiple horizons, where we're talking about a smaller goal and a larger one.
Absolutely. So it doesn't need to be like very specific thing going a year from now, but also as with OKRs and the rolling planning, you can have the outline of the goal, or at least the direction, and specify it as you get closer. Because also, it's not always clear, at least in my experience in professional coaching as well, is when you start, you have somewhat rough understanding of the assessment of what is. And it is very rare that in the beginning teams have capability to assess themselves accurately, right? That said, it is hard to project the speed of them integrating changes and building capabilities. So that said, I suggest always to plan for shorter, also for them to understand the level of ambition and the speed at which they're going, so that they calibrate further without losing motivation.
Is there such a thing as too short?
Probably.
Do you have an idea what that is?
Isn't it also depending on the change, right? If you're being
Yeah.
Sure.
big change, a week is too short. But if you're bringing a small change, a week might be just right.
I think it also depends on the goals that the team is willing to achieve. For example, if they're willing to build certain capabilities as muscles, if you intensely exercise for 1 week versus sustainably exercise over the course of several months, right? There needs to be the sustainability built into this. It's not just, checking certain thing. So I hope it answers the question. Okay.
Yes, you did.
And then we go to a very interesting place. Ooh, that's a hot one. Expectations of the team. And here I also put the sponsor. Okay, so it's not just the client, it's also the sponsor. And here we start exploring what kind of behaviors, what kind of attitudes would like to have in order to achieve those goals. These are just examples questions. There are many more that you can explore specifically. Like, what do you think might need to change in the way you communicate and give and receive feedback? Or what might need to change in the way you collaborate to achieve those goals? And if you hear, oh, we're fine, thanks. So you've been doing something before and you were not able to achieve those goals, but you expect to achieve those goals without changing anything. So this is another way of, playing it back to the team. The tip here is, of course, to share your expectations as a coach from of the team and the sponsor, and also try to be, of course, be as specific as possible, and between the parties, the expectations of the parties. For example, the team might says, we expect the sponsor to support us with the following topics. That might not necessarily be some specific initiatives or projects, but for example, we say we expect the sponsor to support us with the topic of learning, like be it a dedicated time we can take for learning or budget or some other opportunities. And the sponsor also plays their expectation to the team. So I expect us to openly discuss what's working and what's not working for you. Okay. So, and this is where you're already, seeding the commitment to change. Isn't that beautiful? I love it. So then we go to the coaching offer, meaning what's in your toolbox as an Agile coach that you have to offer that supports the goals. Meaning each of us have our unique constellation of skills, competences, the tools we use. And here's your time to start mapping of what you have and you think might help to somehow outline what to expect from the coaching program, so to say. Now, you might not be able to cover it all. For example, you see the need in design thinking training, and you don't have this in the box. Be honest about that. Saying, hey, folks, you probably need that, but you will probably need to rely on someone else on that. I can try to do some fundamentals, but you have to know I don't have experience in that. Something along these lines. So, and also asking them, so what else do you think might be helpful to add to the coaching activities? Because quite often people know what they want to do. Moving further. Ooh, sorry, Leo, go on. You have a question?
Yeah, Nadezhda, you just told us a little bit earlier that you want to squash the triangle. You don't want to have the triangle, but having this discussion and having whatever you show here in this slide, you just established the triangle. And maybe people will get used exactly with that kind of environment where you have the triangle. And we know that's bad. So how do you actually put together the triangle at the beginning and then you split it apart?
I don't see it as a establishing triangle, just the opposite. You put the sponsor and the client in one room, and you have this conversation with everybody present.
Okay, but then when you get the requests and the needs and goals and success criteria, those you say they should come from the sponsor, but you want
No,
them
they
to be
come from the team and the sponsor. I said that these expectations, and I put the sponsor there too. So the sponsor
Okay.
says, okay, folks, I really need you to be able to deliver that. It's really crucial for our business unit. And the team says, well, okay, we get it. But for us to be able to get this, we need the support from you on this and that.
No, I agree.
Mhm.
I think it's a very good answer. Thank you. No, I really agree. And the most important thing you just said it. Everybody should be in the room, so the triangle doesn't grow up from here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Good.
more often, honestly, you will face the situations where you bring these people in one room, physical or virtual, and they cannot agree. You do not let it slide. What you can do in this case, you can say, okay, folks, I see we are not fully aligned there. Can I offer you my help in facilitating the conversation, in finding the common denominator?
Yes.
So then you do not go from there just to create the agreement. You make sure you bring them all together, because otherwise you'll be pulled in all kind of directions. Everybody will be miserable.
I agree with that. I agree with that. So you have to be careful from the beginning not to create that kind of situation.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So are you then playing the role of a facilitator here rather than coach?
I think it's kind of a blurry lines. You can facilitate the conversation of the parties who are disagreeing, but you're also in the coaching role asking powerful questions.
Mm-hmm.
And putting the emphasis on responsibility of making choices to the respective parties.
Mm-hmm.
Does it answer your question?
So you facilitate the conversation between the two areas of the triangle?
Well, you bring them in one, and then there is no triangle.
Yeah.
You work with them as the system that potentially have different caliber of goals, and you make sure that they're aligned, and you list this.
But now you are coaching them together.
Yes.
Yeah, you kind of set up your environment from there on. They have to understand that, yes, we are all in this together. We cannot go separate parts, use separate ways. We have to be always like this if we want to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also conscious of time, so there are just a few more things to share. Well, also expectations of a coach. It's fair, we're in partnership. Talking about expectations from one side implies expectations from the other side. And there, of course, it's really valuable to talk about, so what do you expect from this role? For example, also in the behavior, like we want you to give us really direct feedback on whether or not it's working or what you observe, and so on and so forth. But also, it is important from you to already start sharing some preferences in your coaching style, so that they can understand where you're coming from. Like if you're an introvert and prefer to have some quiet time before you're able to step in and share something, except of being constantly engaged in multiple conversations, well, that's your time to start establishing these boundaries. Yeah. Yes. I'm not going to do your push-ups for you. That's exactly here. And also, how will you know coaching is adding value? This is very interesting question to discuss from the team. Moving further, what I found incredibly valuable to add is disclosing your growth as a coach. Essentially, what needs to be part of this coaching engagement for me to grow? And this can be either some specific skills, capabilities that you want to practice or grow, or simply get more experience in, or tune up your mastery for a more nuanced approach. And it is fair if you step with the disclosure of how you want to grow, knowing how your client wants to grow, that creates the space for mutual development. Yes, Mark?
Is that important primarily for modeling vulnerability and kind of in cranking up the safety in the room?
That too, but I use it in very selfish reasons. I need to remind myself, I need to keep myself accountable. I need to stretch myself. And I want it to be part of this that reminds me that that's not just 9 to 5. I have something at stake in this agreement as well, so that it doesn't turn into routine. It keeps me on the edge. Okay. And last but not least, very practical things around milestones, checkpoints. How do we and when review the progress of the coaching engagement? This can be somewhat as a meta retrospective at the regular cadence where all the parties come in and discuss how is it going. And also, it's really interesting to have certain understanding, how do we decide it's time to terminate our coaching engagement? Okay, right. And we're finishing with my 5 top tips. So, as usual, right? Get clarity on your intent, values, principles before you start the game. Get the rules of the game clear before. As mentioned, it's not only about relationships. Sometimes transactional approach is sufficient for the client and for their level of readiness. What is really, what I found really valuable for me is co-creating the introduction of yourself as an Agile coach with the sponsor. Don't just drop it on the sponsor. This is already somewhat discussion of how you want to be positioned in the organization. Yep, bring them all in one room, the sponsor and the team. And yes, it's an ongoing activity. Also, to keep yourself on the edge, to keep yourself stretching, reviewing and adjusting. So last but not least, talking about choices, I really wish to everybody that may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. With that, thank you. I guess we're a little bit overrun, but are there any questions?
Yes, Santa has one about depending on the culture, the team may not open up when the sponsor is there.
Well, then this is something you can name the elephant in the room.
How do you do that?
Well, there are different ways, but you can say, well, I noticed that there is more silence. I don't see as much engagement. Why do you think that is?
Do you do that with the sponsor or with the team?
I would first do that with the sponsor present and ask the sponsor too.
So again, let me just rephrase that. So you would do it with everybody in the room.
Yes.
That's important, because if you say just with the sponsor, then it's not correct. Okay, I understand. Good.
Yeah. And maybe that might be an indicator the organization is not ready.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is the moment, Gino, when you say, you know what, maybe they're not prepared for this, let's walk away. Might be your choice.
Yeah. Because if you take on the savior role, which unfortunately I've seen quite a lot of agile coaches doing, oh, I'm gonna turn this organization around. I'm gonna make them awesome. They're so toxic, but that's why they need me so much. Oh boy.
Okay.
Okay.
Any last minute thoughts? I know it is time.
Actually, I was on mute. I was kind of focalizing my thoughts. Mark talked about it earlier as well. We have situations, or we have had situations where we actually walked away because we could not agree on how we would coach and what was necessary for us to be successful as well. We walked away. The company the company basically crawled the market and tried to figure out if there were other coaches that they could benefit from. They hired those other coaches, the same ones that we rejected, that we believe did not fulfill their need. And 3 months later, they were knocking on our door and they said, "Yep, I think you were right 3 months ago. Let's try this all over again." And we had a way better relationship.
Yeah. I walked away a number of times, and that's the best. Sometimes that's the best you can do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Nadezhda, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
insights. And people are posting here that they really liked it and they find it very insightful and thought-provoking. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Thanks for the questions, for the conversations. And Nadezhda, thanks for leading this topic.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day, the evening, wherever you are.
Bye, guys.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Pleasure meeting you all.
Welcome.
Okay, Nadezhda, good to see you again.